What's up, everybody? Every time I get into this book, I find new crazy stuff, like where huge pockets of gas form somehow and then ignite, literal great balls of fire. But the thing is, that's not the first time I've heard of this. There's reports of the same thing happening in northern Wisconsin in 1871. And now I am like 99% positive that some medieval monk, probably Dionysius Batavius and Joseph Scaliger, took all of these accounts of a worldwide event that happened and just started slapping dates on them. Tunisia, 435. Here's one of the biggest faux pas in the dating that I've seen. We'll see if the history buffs catch it. This is under 1348, the time of the Black D, and there is page after page of archaic remedies for the affliction, like some goat's dung, crude mercury, a dram and a half each, strongest vinegar, rose water, infuse for 10 days, then boil away to the consumption of the juices. Dry and powder the remainder, dose a dram every morning. They liked their mercury back in the day. Maybe I should look into that. Are they secretly hiding the miracles of mercury? Anyway, Turks themselves durst not trust to their absolute predestination, but cruelly deserted and fled from their nearest relations, violating and contempting the strictest ties both of nature and religion. The Durs spread from people to people. By the way, Yersinia pestis does not spread people to people unless there's some fluids involved, but it spread country to country. In the Low Countries, Brabant escaped. In 1350, it reached the Hungarians, Goths, Vandals, and the most northerly people. You guys catch the problem here? The last of the Goths was in 711 AD, 600 years before the Black D, and then the Vandals disappeared 534 AD, 800 years before the Black D. So this author didn't think twice about referring to the northern kingdoms as Gothic and Vandal. And this is how someone from the Roman Empire would think of this, just the Germanic tribes up to the north. He's definitely not referring to them as the people that took over all of Europe and North Africa for a couple hundred years. This is how they created the big time gap. Is they say that all of the civilized world fell to these barbarians, and then the world fell into the Dark Ages for 800 years. Well, if that were the case, this author in the 1300s would not have thought of the Goths and Vandals as just northern tribes. He would have thought of them as the people that ruled this whole area for hundreds of years. And this would be like me referring to the Spanish as the Castilians or Mexicans as Toltecs. I mean, that's just an impossible jump. So this idea of the Dark Ages and the Goths taking over is a medieval invention. Also, during this time, they say that the Byzantine Empire lived in relative obscurity for 1,000 years, where basically nothing happened. A couple skirmishes with the Muslims, a couple hundred years apart, but no other empire has lasted anywhere close to that long. So for me, this seals the deal that they invented that whole era, and it throws into question when all of these events took place. Was it all over 100 years? To me, it seems like you've got basically 0 to 500 AD and then the big event. And here's what was going on during that. Comets, meteors, fire beams, rarefactions in the air, mock suns, heavens on fire, it raining blood, of course. And then I found this hidden in there. Asia. By reason of an igneous vapor or sulfurous fire breaking forth from the earth or falling from heaven, which utterly consumed men, beasts, houses, stones, and trees to the very ground, and stretched forward, milling along in smoking balls of stinking pestilential fire for 200 leagues of the continent, or 15 days' journey together, which so infected the air of these parts that there fell down millions of young serpents and other venomous insects. In countries remote from the fiery eruption were found prodigious multitudes of large vermin with tails and 8 short legs, all over black, some living, others not. Okay, let's start at the end and work back. Vermin with 8 short legs. There are no vertebrates that I know of that have 8 legs. So are these Agarthian pets that escaped from inner Earth when the vast clefts opened up? That's just really weird that they're saying that there is an animal that we've never seen before that showed up after this. So balls of stinking pestilential fire for 200 leagues of the continent. A league is about 3.5 miles. So that's about 700 miles or so, stretching across all of North Africa or wherever. Apparently, some people smelt it and weren't part of the ignition sequence. Somebody's got to live to tell the tale. But when they lit up, they took out everything. And the craziest thing is, this isn't the only time I've heard of this happening. This is the Great Peshtigo Fire of 1871, which happened at the exact same time as the Chicago one. Only Peshtigo is hundreds of miles up to the north, and they swear it came from the sky. At about 9 o'clock, a strange sound burst upon our ears, coming from the southwest. At first, it seemed a great way off, but gradually grew nearer and nearer until, as if by magic, a sea of flame rolled in upon us, and mountains of fire rose up around us. Rushing furiously forward, the flames would leap high in air, then dive to earth again, seemingly meaning to leave nothing unscorched or living. Here and there bursting forth and spreading as fast as I could discern until it seemed that the whole heavens were on fire, and the earth to be but a vast pit of fire wherein all must perish. How frightful, yet how grand, how indescribably grand was the sight. So this was witnessed by thousands of people. Everybody had their own unique perspective. Another person writes, "Your readers may wonder what I mean by fire balloons, and I confess that I hardly know myself, and only use the term because it was so frequently used by others in conversation with me. All of the survivors with whom I converse said that the whole sky seemed filled with dark, round masses of smoke about the size of a large balloon, which traveled with fearful rapidity. These balloons would fall to the ground, burst, and send forth a most brilliant blaze of fire, which would instantly consume everything in the neighborhood. An eyewitness, who was in a pool of water not far off, told us about the balloon falling right down on the Lawrence family." Yeah, nightmares for life after that. So I've got a couple of thoughts on that. Have you ever seen a candle? You can blow it out and then relight the smoke, and the flame will chase back down to the source. So that is like a vapor trail with a small amount of combustibles left in there, but that's a constant stream. But I think you would see that flame chase back down to somewhere that was already on fire and smoldering, which isn't the case, obviously, because the Lawrence family wouldn't already be standing there. And I'm just ruling out possibilities here, but they describe them as large, dark clouds the size of large balloons. So, okay, a gas cloud, but they're saying it's moving really fast, and a gas cloud isn't going to stay together if it's moving really fast. It has to have the wind to blow it, and that's going to diffuse everything, one would think. Let's read another account, because you got to keep in mind, everybody's got their limited point of view. If you're in a forested area, on a river, at best, you're only seeing what's within 10 or 20 miles of you, unless it's really high up in the sky. About 9 o'clock Sunday night, a terrible tornado swept down from the southwest through the western side of the country, carrying death and destruction in its awful career. The fire did not come upon the people gradually from burning trees or other objects to the windward, but the first notice they had of it was a whirlwind of flames in great clouds from above the tops of the trees, which fell upon and enveloped everything. The atmosphere seemed to be on fire. The poor people inhaled it or the intensely hot air and fell down. Look, these are loggers and the like up in northern Wisconsin. This is where the legends of Paul Bunyan comes from. So they knew what a regular forest fire was, and this wasn't it. There were a few towns and whatnot, which even those people, frontiers people, they know what a regular conflagration is like. Here, everybody's loading up on a train trying to get out of town. They hung onto windows anywhere they could hold on to get out as fast as possible. Then, the ball of fire in the air swooped down on the train before it could leave, burning everyone to a crisp. Hundreds perished. They never got out of town. An article in Argosy magazine in the 1970s says a UFO may have been involved, of course. Some try to say it was just a bad forest fire, but my great-grandfather spoke to the frightened survivors in person, and they all said the fire came from the sky. Some said great balls of fire were burning in the air, and there was no forest nearby. Likewise, my great-grandfather worked for the railroad at the time of the Great Hinckley Fire. Now, this is on the other side of the Great Lake. They come across some old journals and said, apparently, a fire started in a non-combustible area. Eyewitnesses insisted the fire came from the sky like a huge ball of flames. The townspeople were so terrified they crowded onto the only transportation out of town at that time, the train. Hundreds scrambled to get in and on top of the train. Sounds like the people that were ducking down in the rivers did better than the people going for the train, because you don't hear any stories about the great ball of fire falling on the people in the river. Now let's add another clue to the puzzle. The character of this was unlike anything we've ever seen described before. It was a flame fanned by a hurricane and accompanied with various electrical phenomena. Those that survived the terrible ordeal testify that they received electrical shocks, while they saw electrical flames flash in the air and dance over the surface of the earth around them. But the fury of the flash was past in half an hour, while the flames went on through the night. Okay, so the electrical phenomenon only happened for about a half hour. I just talked about this in the last video. Hurricane force winds, electrical phenomena, and fire in the heavens. These are the things that happen when you have a comet or meteorite event. And people that want to tell me that rocks don't fly from the sky, we can talk about that recent trip everybody took down to Antarctica if you want. A few big-name people are rethinking their worldview right now. But look, you have a celestial object coming into the atmosphere at whatever speeds. Now, it was just proven that they don't have to be traveling 70 bazillion miles an hour. I'll have to show you guys that one. But when we see the big fireballs, they're cooking. So who knows how many pieces this was in, but as it came in, it's generating hurricane force winds, and that difference in electrical potential is discharging these gnarly lightning storms. But that only lasts for about a half hour, and then everything equalizes. And look, with things like this, I live in a world of probability instead of absolute fact. And this is my most likely candidate because it explains all the phenomena. Now, an earthquake can produce the electrical discharges, piezoelectric discharges. The fire balloons could be gas that was released from in the earth, but it doesn't explain hurricane force winds. The meteorite theory covers all of the criteria. Keep in mind, we have simultaneous conflagrations breaking out in these three areas that we know about, and who knows how many more. What's more is we know that all of these broke out at the same time around 9 p.m. So it makes perfect sense that a meteorite, comet, whatever you want to call it, was flying through here, broke into a bunch of pieces, and fell hundreds of miles apart from one another. This all happened on October the 8th. That just happens to be the peak of the annual Draconid meteor shower that is leftover debris from Comet 21P. I'm surprised they didn't say Halley's. Everything in history was Halley's. So this comet broke apart who knows how long ago and left a debris field that we travel through every year. Most of it is just really small pieces, so we get a cool light show and watch them all just burning up in the atmosphere. But apparently, when we passed through here in 1871, there were some big chunks left over. So now let's explain the fire balloons. Comets are more likely to contain methane gas than meteorites. Most meteorites are just basic metals and minerals mixed together. But comets can contain chunks of frozen gases like methane, ammonia. And since we were traveling through a comet's debris field for this meteor shower, it was those broken off chunks of frozen gases. And if you think about it, this means that any given October, this could happen. Or for that matter, there are a lot of annual meteor showers that this could happen in any given time. So these heating gases and probably chunks of metal and stone as well are coming into the atmosphere. And as the ice is melting, it's creating these gas pockets. The iron chunks are creating a big electrical disturbance. You get a flash of lightning and the whole sky goes up in flames. While in other places, you have these gas balls that aren't ignited yet, just waiting for a spark. So that's why the electrical phenomena only happens for a short period of time, but of course the fire rages on for days. Now in this, they're saying they're just the size of balloons, and they mean hot air balloons. But back in the 1300s, they're saying that these were hundreds of miles long. 15 days journey from end to end. Now, since they're describing the smell and everything there, I'm guessing that that part didn't ignite. You know, at some point it's going to become diffuse enough that it won't ignite. But the ones that did utterly consumed men, beasts, houses, stones, and trees to the very ground. So I've said for quite a while that I think what happened in the 1300s was a major impact event, big enough to affect the whole world, but not everybody in the world saw it. And this threw the world into the little ice age. It took a couple hundred years for everything to stabilize after this. Anyway, there you have it. Great Balls of Fire is a real thing. And you know, Jerry Lee Lewis got famous in the 1950s. So this was probably a saying that the old timers used from the 1871 event. And then everybody just finally decided, those old guys are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. That's what happens with everybody in history. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.